We're going to get into that a little bit more. Now, I want you to understand that this process of pigmentation is based on many things. First of all, it's based on melanocytes. It's obvious. No melanocytes, no pigmentation. If there's no factory to make it, no pigmentation. Now, these melanocytes get a signal. Your body has a genetic code that gives a signal. Make more melanocytes. It has a switch. These genes, they're turned on and off. So there is a gene that is turning off the synthesis of these cells. So one of the things that we want, if we want to promote color, we want to do things that they upregulate the gene. That means that we go and tickle those genes to make more melanocytes, because more melanocytes, more color. And those genes can get on and off. There are three key things. Listen, I know there are some of you guys that are great scientists, and they're going to say, well, there's more than what Darius is saying. I'm just picking the important ones that I want you to remember. Right. The story is much more sophisticated than this, what I'm telling you. So there is an alpha MSH, that is the melanocyte stimulating hormone. Then there is a transcription factor, MITF. And then there's a tumor growth factor, beta 1. These three components, they, in a way, they're upregulations of these ingredients will either turn on and off these melanocyte synthesis. So as biochemists and formulation chemists, when we design a product that we want to really help control the pigmentation, we look at molecules, we look at herbs, we look at ingredients that affect these three things. That's part of the formulation. So overall, less of these cells, less pigmentation. That's one step. Now, we go one more thing. Now, remember, I told you that now we are focusing on this melanocyte itself. This melanocyte has these melanosomes in it, and in there, they have the melanin. When these melanosomes get created, they start synthesizing the melanin. They get transported from these tentacles into the cells, and then they spread the melanin inside and in between the cells, and that's where the color comes from. So anything that controls the creation of these melanosomes inside the melanocytes, anything that helps it transfer, imagine this as being a slide. If this slide doesn't work properly, everything gets stuck in here and it doesn't get to the cells. But if I put some slippery stuff in that slide, then these melanosomes get transferred easier and then started releasing the melanin. So another thing that when we design a good formulation is that we pay attention to these melanosomes. We're looking for ingredients that upregulate the formation of the melanosomes and also the transfer of these melanosomes to your skin. So that is the part 2 that is very important when you're designing a formulation. Now, we get to the part that a lot of people don't want to touch, okay? That's called the melanin synthesis. Now, I have created I have put the pathway here. It can get very messy. That's why I drew this here, because it's a little bit messy. A lot of people don't like looking at it, and a lot of people, if they don't have an organic chemistry background, they really have a hard time to understand.
This is also why, when you're talking about hyperpigmentation or pigmentation or melasma, and people say, can I just use alpha-arbutin, or can I use vitamin C, or can I use glutathione, or can I use azelaic, or can I use hydroquinone, right? It's not, or tranexamic. It's not that simple. Because depending on where the problem is, that's why each one of those ingredients takes a different route. Each one of those ingredients affects a different signal. So when we're opening up a pathway, it is many, many roads are leading to this. And this is why sometimes when you'll say, my girlfriend used azelaic and it got rid of it, but it didn't work for me, so your product doesn't work. That's not the case. That's the wrong pathway for you. Maybe you
Your
require-
problem is somewhere else.
Your problem is somewhere else, exactly.
So let me give you a very simple analogy. Two people have headaches, and they both take acetaminophen. It helps one and not the other, because the mechanism where acetaminophen was working was helping one, and the other one, that mechanism was not the cause of the headache. The mechanism is something else.
Right.
But maybe ibuprofen works for them. Okay? So this is where we are going. So I'm taking this really, really complicated thing. I'm going to make it very simple for you. Okay? So let's go. Key things to remember. The whole process of making a melanin, just imagine you have a bunch of Legos that you're making the house. The basic building block of that house is that block. It starts with an amino acid called tyrosine, okay? If there's no tyrosine, that means like a bakery that has no dough, it has no flour. It can't cook, it can't make it. You can have the best bakery ever, but if there is no flour, it cannot synthesize, it cannot bake. So this is the tyrosine. You need this tyrosine. Now, this tyrosine, to eventually get converted into the melanin, there's this, remember this complicated reaction that I created here? It needs enzymes, okay? Enzymes facilitate reactions. Now, out of all that complicated thing, I want you to remember three things. One is tyrosinase, and then I'm going to call it TYRP1, which is standing for tyrosinase-related protein 1. So TYRP1 and TYRP2 with the tyrosinase is the one that controls that melanogenesis, the melanin synthesis inside the cells. That's very important. Now, sometimes when your skin is having problem with light spots, or sometimes when you get dark, this process is working properly, and the problem is the highway. So everything inside is, imagine if I have that bakery, I'm making all the bread, but there are no trucks. There are no trucks to take the bread, to take it from the factory to the store. Okay? So this is the analogy I can give you. So that's why I'm saying that not only you need to have the dough, you need to have the machinery to make the bread, and then you need to be able to transfer the bread. So remember these three things. Tyrosinase, tyrosinase-related protein 1, and tyrosinase-related protein 2. These are the three enzymes. So when we want to reduce pigmentation, a lot of these ingredients, like for example hydroquinone, one of the mechanisms, some of them work on more than one mechanism. It stops the tyrosinase activity. It deactivates the enzyme. So when there is no enzyme, just imagine that factory doesn't have any electricity.
That's turning it off.
It cannot.
Down-regulating.
It down-regulates it. So, but the problem comes here is that a lot of formulators that don't understand the biochemistry of pigmentation, all they can think of is this tyrosine and this tyrosinase. And they only use ingredients that is concentrating on cooking that bread, but they're not looking after the transportation, they're not looking after the delivery and all those things. So if you want to reduce the delivery of the bread, you have to deactivate the trucks. We need to work in a negative way. We need to deactivate the trucks. We need to reduce the electricity inside that factory. We need to not bring enough flour into the factory. So all of these things, it ends up having less bread at the store, which is when we want to make our skin lighter, that's exactly what we want to do.
So instead of in here producing 500 bubbles a minute, it's going to produce 250 bubbles a minute, or
Right.
50 bubbles, or depending on the ingredient or how they turn it off.
Right, exactly. So less bubbles, less melanin synthesis. But inside the melanin synthesis, if there is less tyrosinase, then there is less melanin inside these bubbles to be delivered. Now, let's
So can we go back one thing too? I want to clear this up. So also, so when these bubbles these melanosomes come up, they have a certain shade. So that shade then gets lightened or darkened depending on an activity.
The activity that is based on this manufacturing. So the amount of shade or the amount of pigment that is inside those bubbles now is based on here. But if there's no bubbles, then these things cannot be created. Okay?